Deuteronomy chapter 29. Let's read this. Let's read verse 19 through 21. Quote, "If there is such a person, when he hears the words of this curse," this is Moshe speaking, "he will bless himself secretly, saying to himself, I will be all right, even though I will stubbornly keep doing what I feel like doing, so that I, although dry," that is sinful, "will be added to the water," that is the righteous. But, as I keep reading this passage, I think it's verse 20, "But ADONAI will not forgive him," Moshe says. "Rather, the anger and jealousy of ADONAI will blaze up against that person. Every curse written in this book will be upon him. ADONAI will blot out his name from under heaven." And then verse 21, "ADONAI will single him out from all the tribes of Israel to experience what is bad in all the curses of the covenant written in this book of the Torah." End quote. And if you're in the class with me, you'll see that I've highlighted in verse 20, "But ADONAI will not forgive him," this person who says to himself, I'm going to stubbornly keep sinning, even though I'm dry. In other words, I think I'll be added to the water, that is, added to the righteous. I'm going to stubbornly keep doing this. "ADONAI will blot out his name." Every curse written in this book will be upon him. So if you think about it from God's perspective, if you're not declared righteous by God, specifically if you're thumbing your nose at God's commandments and you're purposely walking, stubbornly sinning, purposely walking in disobedience to what God is commanding you as a covenant member, then you're going to find that you're going to be declared cursed. You're going to be in a position where God doesn't forgive you. Moshe describes it as every curse of this book will be upon you. So, question, those of you who know a little bit of English grammar, if the curse is upon you, where does that put you? That means you're under the curse. You're under the law, right? If I play with the phrase "under the law," that means you're under the curse of the law. So I think that's what Paul means in Romans, in his Romans use there, Romans 6 that we just read in Romans 6, 14 and 15. "Sin will have no dominion over you, since you're not under the curse of the law. You're not under the condemnation of the law. You're under grace." And why would you be under grace, according to Paul? Because you've been acquitted. You're under the grace of Messiah. You're not going to receive the declaration of sinner. You're not going to fall under the punishment that's reserved for sinners. And you're certainly not going to be condemned at the end of the day, on Judgment Day, because Jesus has paid the price. He has cleared you of guilt. And that's why Paul would say, "What then? Are we to sin because we're not under the condemnation of the law? Because we're not under condemnation? Because we're not under the ultimate penalty? And we're not under God's thumb of judgment? Are we then to say, wow, this is a license to sin because God's not going to punish me?" It's almost like the person speeding down the road with this assumption that he's not going to get pulled over by the police because he's been given some kind of free pass from the judge. He's been acquitted by the judge of a previous speeding ticket, so now he thinks it's okay to speed because he's not going to get hauled into court and given a ticket and given a fine and getting his points taken off his license. That doesn't work at all. Everyone understands my analogy. Well, it's the same thing going on in the Bible. God's not saying just because I cleared you of sin, cleared you of guilt, declared you righteous, and placed you under the grace of my Son, that now you have a license to sin. Perish that thought. So Paul's trying to say, are we to sin because we're not under the penalty of the law, but under grace of Messiah? By no means. That's what it means under the law. It doesn't seem to make any sense for Paul to say that sin will have no dominion over you since you're not under obligation to keep the law, but you're under grace. Romans 6:14. That doesn't fit the context of any of Paul's commentaries to the law that we read about in his letters. That doesn't seem to fit with the theology of the passage that we just read in Deuteronomy. It doesn't fit with any of the covenantal language that we read about in the Torah. Once God declares you acquitted, go ahead and start sinning. Doesn't fit. What then, verse 15 of Romans 6, are we to sin because we're not under obligation to keep the law but under grace? By no means. Also, doesn't fit with the context. So it's better to read at least this version of under the law as the way I'm describing it. So let's go back to my commentary.